So my homeboy told me for to hook him up with a girl. And I told him I'd try. And I tried for 3 days. And she said that she didn't want to go out with him because she heard he had a baby on the way. So the king started talking. We started talking on the phone, but only as friends. And the whole point of the story is that, you know, we never seen each other never in life. That's the whole point of the story. So we talked on the phone for a whole year without never seeing each other. And during that following year, we got out of touch. 1 year later, I go to this parade in Lafayette, you know, with my homeboys. And, you know, I'm out there just drunk on that Grey Goose, getting loose, you heard me? And my name is Daniel. I like to be called Danny. And my homeboys, they start calling me D-Love. They named me D-Love because I was getting on so many girls. They was like, D-Love, D-Love, go get her, go get her. And you know, the king would just go and get them and everything. You heard me? And I got 12 girls. She made magic number 13, but the king about to get off into that. You know, so bad with the king. So we find out that they have a fair going on down the street. We go to this fair, and we it had a picture booth. So we jumped in this picture booth, and you know, we just up in the picture booth snapping it up. And spirit hit the king because the king is a very spiritual guy, and told the king to look back. So the king looked back, and then I'll say that I caught this girl attention when I looked in her direction, because when I looked in her direction, she looked me in the eye. And when she looked me in the eye, I looked her in the eye. So we caught eye contact for a split second. And she turned her head, you know, and when she turned her head, I turned my head. And we done that 4 times, you know, like a true love story would go. So the king looked back at her again. She looked at me, and I turned my head. And then she turned her head. When the king looked back at her again, she looked at me, and she turned her head, and I turned my head. When I looked back, that the next time, you know, I looked back, and she was walking off. You heard me? And the king ran behind her and asked her, "Where you going?" She was like, "I'll be back." Straight like that. So the king went back to the picture booth, you know, and start back just snapping it up. And spirit hit the king again, because the king is a very spiritual guy. You heard me? And that inner voice, okay? That intuition, gut feeling, all right? Now keep in mind, the king is a master psychologist, okay? So facial expressions, different tones in your voice, body language is the king beyond all that. So the king don't miss shit, all right? So the king noticed that this girl was walking in his direction, okay? And her head was in the air like this, like she's looking for something or someone, which was me, the king, who she was looking for. So the king walked up to her. As she got closer, the king walked up to her, and you know, we started walking and talking. And the king asked her, you know, what's your name? She told me her name. The king asked her, where you from? She told me where she was from. Now keep in mind, me and this girl had talked on the phone for a whole year, but without never seeing each other. So I'm actually talking to someone I already know. But at that particular time, the king ain't know, and the queen ain't know. So, surprise. But I mean, it gets deeper just bad with the king, okay? Now, keep in mind, a fucking year talking on the phone with someone, that's a lot of time and a lot of conversations, the king would say. So we knew pretty much everything about one another. And, you know, it's fucking the basics for sure. I mean, fucking, you know, name and where you're from. But shit, at that particular time, the king ain't know and the queen ain't know. The king was intoxicated. I was drunk. Fuck, so that was my excuse Her excuse was, we never had seen each other before, never in life, which was my excuse too. So the king had two. Surprise, Uranus. But I mean, now, guys, ladies and gentlemen, the king got the queen number, you know, and went home. You know, my homeboys dropped me off and shit at the crib. You heard me? Fuck crib, you know, castle. And, you know, the king called her and asked her, what you doing? She was like, I'm still at the fair. And she was like, I'll call you tomorrow. And the next day, shit, the king called her immediately, like real life. And she was the first out of the 12 girls. She made magic number 13, okay? But out of the rest of the 12 girls, she was the first and the only one the king called, because the king knew something spiritual had took place, or something magical. Like something ain't feel right, but it felt right. It felt just right. Like I'll say that, like something spiritual or magical hadn't took place. I knew that, cause in the back of my mind, like that name resonated with me, for as her name go, and that place where she was from go. But at the same time, like I said, I was drunk and everything, you know. And we had talked on the phone for a whole year and everything. So moving on, the king called her the next day and asked her again, what's your name? Where you from? She told the king again, and nothing. You heard me? You know, the king told her as well. Nothing. So, I mean, we totally had forgot. So, moving on, story goes, the king asked her, do you come to Baton Rouge? Because she's not from Baton Rouge, and that's where the king, you know, was going like a lot, like every day. With my homeboy from the beginning of the story, I was supposed to be matching him up. Yeah, that guy. So the king asked her, do you come to Baton Rouge? She was like, yeah. And the king asked her, when you come to Baton Rouge, where do you go? She was like, I go to Sherwood a lot. And that's where the king was going, like every day. So, I mean, and the story get crazy. The king skipped a lot of shit, just trying to get down to the, you know, the main scenes, okay? That make the king king, that make the queen queen, and of course our young prince, all right? Yes, the king and the queen have a prince, yes, already famous, okay? But moving on. So the king actually was talking to her friend at one time, her best friend at one time that was from Sherwood, which was she saying that she was going a lot. So, I mean, the story gets crazy. The king just skipping all that shit and sticking, you know, to the main scenes, all right? That make the king king, okay? So the king asked her, yeah, like, you come to Baton Rouge? She was like, yeah. And the king asked her, where you go? She was like, I go to Sherwood a lot. Now the king asked her, do you know a guy named Ryan from Sherwood, which was the guy from the beginning of the story? My friend, okay? The one the king was supposed to be matching him up? Yeah, that guy. So the king asked her, do you know a guy named Ryan from Ryan from Sherwood? She was like, Ryan who? The king said, Ryan from the back of Sherwood. She was like, yeah, I know him. The king said, Christine, it's Danny. She said, Danny who? The king said, Danny from a year ago. The queen said, oh my God. The king said, this is crazy. You heard me? Yeah, she's white, okay? Mom's white, and she's also Spanish, Mexican. Dad, he's Mexican, he's Spanish, okay? So at the end of the day, this goes to show you guys that color doesn't matter. So shake off your slave masters, okay? But, I mean, you know, when the king said, this is crazy, the king was at his fucking cousin house down the street. And shit, the king ran all the way home and, you know, busted through the door and told my mom, I found my girl. She was like, what, boy? The king said, I found my girl. Like, you know, straight like that, because she was coming out of the back room, entering the living room, and heading towards her room. Shit, the king bust through the door, put that shoulder on that bitch, boom. And she was, you know, walking. I stopped in her tracks, walking through the living room, and was like, Mom, I found my girl, I found my girl. She was like, what, boy? I said, I found my girl, I found my girl. Gasped her for breath, holding my knees, looking up at her and shit like, like that. And fucking, I found my girl, I found my girl. And, you know, adrenaline was just, you heard me, so crazy, so turned up to him. We just start fucking hugging each other and jumping around in a circle, spinning and shit. So, I mean, it just, you know, experience that only one can fucking experience in a lifetime, you know. But I mean, it come a day and age when the planets align, you hear me, and the dates align, you know, numerical speaking, you hear me, astrological speaking, and kings are born. That's right, you know. It come a day and age, a day and time when the planets align, when the numbers align, you hear me. Astrology speaking and numerical speaking, when fucking events take place, you hear me. So I mean, that's what you call a soul contract, you hear me, soulmate. Okay, but I mean, the date was aligned, the planets was aligned, and everything. So I mean, you know, moon was up in, sun was in Pisces, moon was in Pisces. For those who know Pisces motto, shout out to you. You know, you already know what it is. That's right. So it's the king. But I mean, you know, the date was lined up. We met in a universal year, number 8, a 8 universal year. You know, turn an 8 on this side, and you already know you get the infinity sign. So I mean, that's fate. Okay. You hear me? Infinity and beyond. So, it's the king. But the king just wanted to give you guys his love story, true story. Who want to see the king?